And now, the finale.
Thank God!
ESPN's woke documentary,
Bullshit?
Skin of the Game. America has seen black athletes as animals
What?
since day one.
Are you retarded?
Well, it's always nice to go out on a high note. I'm Jazz Berganzo, and this...
And there's two sides. There's black people, and there's niggas.
It's What's Next. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, I am Jazz Berganzo. This is What's Next. Hope you guys are feeling good today. Of course, this is your daily. Happy Monday. Well, I'm feeling pretty good. My Philadelphia Eagles won. A struggle, but a win nonetheless. Anywho. Speaking of sports. Oh, well, woke sports, anyway. ESPN put a 5-part documentary called Skin of the Game. And of course, teaming up with Kendi X, the Rahcist professor. Who's, I think he's going broke now, but not sure. Anyway. They put out a 5-part documentary on racisms against the black athlete. And why Whitey has kept the black athlete down. Well, we're not in the home stretch. We're here at the final. Yes. ESPN's woke documentary, Skin in the Game. America has viewed black athletes as animals since day one. Well, never let it be said that Kendi X won't go out on a high note. Oof. And here we go. Of course, this comes out of Outkick. ESPN, Ibram Kendi. I call him Kendi X, sounds good. Documentary says America has viewed black athletes as animals since day one. Episode 5, Out of Focus. Episode focuses entirely on the racisms of the sports media, mostly about the discussion surrounding black athletes. Shocker, I know. Hilariously, the show opens up with a montage of sports broadcasters pointing out the double standard for black athletes. Of course, all the voices in the montage, Stephen A. Smith, of course notorious, Bali Kiram, Cheney Ukunwiki, I mispronounced his last name, but I really don't give a fuck, work at ESPN. Thus, ESPN is going to explain how the sports media is racist against black athletes. Except ESPN Woke is the biggest name in sports media, and they never stop defending black athletes, even when they're wrong, and putting down Whitey. Seriously, I'm running out of way to call this entire project an exercise in hypocrisy, although ESPN might be right. The sports media does appear to be racist, just not in the direction that they claim. But as I wrote in the episode 4, racism is a one-way street. Kendi X explains the introduction of American society as racist. The sports media coverage in America is inherently racist. Stop me if you heard this before. Sidebar. As I explained in the first episode, there are conflicting reports on whether his birth name was Ibram Henry Rogers or simply Henry Rogers. Either way, he changed his name to Ibram Ixlandi Rogers and then married an actual doctor whose last name was Kendi and took her name. Again, like I said in the first episode of this review, yeah, soy boy pussy. So, we're just going to go with Henry Rogers for the remainder of this episode. So Henry Rogers claims that America is so racist that black people get unfair treatment, yet he changed his name so he sounded more traditionally African. After all, he had a nondescript name that a white person may have. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Not a historian. However, I doubt you'll find many examples of Jewish people living in Germany in the 1940s who changed their names to make sure they knew they were Jewish. If anything, they went the opposite direction. They wanted to hide their identity from actual oppressors, unlike the faux oppressors that we have here in 2023. Kendi X thinks that, Henry Rogers thinks black people are so oppressed by whites. Why change his name? Why do so many people with one black parent and one white parent simply identify as black? Perhaps they realize it's more advantageous to identify that way. Again, I don't think many German Jews found it advantageous to identify as Jew in 1941. We continue with luminaries like Jemele Hill. Yes, wonderful Jemele Hill. As I've said in the past, the fact of the matter is that she went so racist on Trump, she got fired. But yet, ESPN says, come on back. Explaining that there are too many whites in sports media and it creates an uncomfortable dynamic for athletes. Then Jessica Mendoza opines that the media marginalizes Latino athletes by lumping them all together rather than focusing on their exact country of origin. Yes, Mexicans are the same as Puerto Ricans. No. Interestingly, the entire fourth episode of this series was about Latino baseball players, and there wasn't much to talk about the country of origin. Apparently, racism only applies to selectively. How, after all, the people in this series are all people of color. By definition, they can't be racist. So, wink, wink. Seriously, anti-racists change their definition of racism to include the individual must be the majority ethnic group, or their behavior cannot be racist. Yes, if you're black or Latino, you can't be racist, because I think is that in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, I think? I don't know. Was it written in some law? I don't know. I'm taking guesses here. The episode then dives into Don Imus's controversy. For those who are old enough to remember, yes, 15 years ago, Kenny invites one of the Rutgers basketball players, Espn'S Carson, onto the show. Once again, Kenny focuses on the past issue, Henry Rogers, as further proof that these problems still exist. Now, if you never saw the episode, it is a classic Don Imus, but unfortunately, it goes horribly wrong. In this case, he uses an isolated incident by one individual to prove that the point that generalized all white media sports members, which seems, dare I say, racist. Carson says that she couldn't believe that people like her didn't like her and her teammates because of their skin color. Except again, this was a comment from one man who was infamous for saying controversial things for the sake of being controversial. Yes, Don Imus traveled in the same circles as one Howard Stern. Then, the doc shows clips of ESPN hosts attacking Imus and people protesting that he loses his job over his remarks. Unironically, one of the ESPN commentators says it's abhorrent that Imus generalized the entire group of people based on their appearance. Like this documentary. What must that be like? It's almost like saying that every white person is racist because of their skin color. Wait, no, it's exactly like that. Imagine if that happened in reverse. Actually, you don't have to imagine. Earlier in 23, the NBA suspended Jay Morant after he twice brandished firearms in public. Stephen A. Smith went on ESPN and said, I don't want white America to think 1 second that this is an example of you're going to shine a light on the collective problem of black community of all over because of this stuff, right? Smith rightfully did not want an entire group of people labeled over the actions of one individual, because that would be like saying Don Imus represents all white people. Fascinating how that works. Carson goes on to say that the worst of the Imus controversy is that he thought that there would be no repercussions since he was talking about black athletes and no one cares about them. Except all of his employers fired Imus for the comments, including MSNBC, who he worked for at the time. There were a ton of backlash, and not just from black people. Doesn't that prove the exact opposite what Rogers and this documentary is trying to claim? Carson even admits that Imus, he was wrong in thinking that he could make those statements with impunity. So why are we thinking that we can do the same thing 16 years later? Before moving on, Rogers guest also work on some sexism into the conversation. Sure, why not? Next up, the panel discussion. I keep hoping that the panel might eventually include someone with an opposing viewpoint. But last, more of the same. ESPN contributor Scoop Jackson, sports editor Dave Zirin, and University of Oklahoma professor Dr. Cynthia Frisbee are the groupthink guests on this particular episode. Guess where they all land politically and socially? I'll wait. You guessed right. I failed to see how gathering nothing but like-minded individuals for a 5-part series that included over 25 different, quote, voices is productive. I put voices in quotes because there's really just one, and that voice yells racisms as often as possible. Jackson starts the panel off with a doozy. When talking about Imus's comments from 2007, Jackson says his words fit into the narrative of looking back on black athletes as animals. It only took 3 quarters for them to come to this conclusion. In this country, that has been a thing since day one. Really? Since when? I'm not going to dignify his comment with a response. I reported his comments, and that's all I can muster on this ridiculousness. The episode then turns to a racist caricature of Serena Williams that appeared in an Australian newspaper. The United States, by the way, condemned the image. It is interesting to use an example from a foreign country, but again, when you don't have any actual real examples, this is what you come up with. So far, we've had two examples of both racism in sports media, one from '07 and one from Australia, both perpetuated by single individuals who used it to disparage an entire group. But we're not done. Rogers, decides to really prove that there is a double standard between white and black. To do this, he points out that Kyrie Irving faced backlash for punishment for tweeting about anti-Semitic movie, while Jerry Jones faced no backlash for a photo from 1957. ESPN then used Rogers to use the Angel Reese Caitlin Clark controversy as another shining example of the invisible double standard. We all know how that ended. The fact of the matter is, both were tremendously skilled players. One acted like the ass, and the other one, not so much. You can figure out which one I'm talking about. Once again, the comparison holds no water. But as I keep having explained, that these examples you get when you have nothing of substance. Rogers eventually turns to Dave Zirin, the only white guest in the entire series. Of course, he's white guilt, of course. And asks him how he can teach whiteness not to be racists. Yes, that's two people we need to learn from. Dave Zirin, he's the beacon of journalistic integrity. Ready for more delicious irony? Zirin explains that the importance of elevating black voices in the sports media space. Interestingly, earlier this year, Zirin called for NBC to fire Tony Dungy, a black member of the sports media, because he's pro-life. Gee, doesn't fit the narrative. Yeah, you gots to go. But of course, he got laughed at. You literally cannot make this stuff up. On the hypocritical, I'll cut this down a bit. But you guys kind of get the gist of the entire series is we're black, Whitey's racist, and America's racist. That's it. That's the documentary in a nutshell. That's it. Because if Henry Rogers, wanted to actually do a documentary that actually had substance, actually was worth giving up about, he would have had voices from all over sports media. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian. He would have had all kinds of voices. Dissenting voices as well. Voices who are going to argue the opposite side. But no, this is ESPN woke. And they really don't care about common sense and facts. Funny how this is the same ESPN just a few years ago when you had the new president come in, and after all this racism, including, of course, Jamel Hill, she got fired, and pretty much they tried to get the politics out of ESPN. Fans were saying, we want sports, shut your mouth. Know your role and shut your mouth when it comes to politics. I don't want to hear it. Just talk about the damn game. Just talk about the damn game. And let me emphasize, just talk about the damn game. So the president said, okay, I'm going to fire the lot of you. We're bringing sports back to ESPN. How did that work out? They're right back to what they do best. Talk about race through prisms and bullshit. And with that being said, I'm Jazz Berganzo. This is What's Next. Want to see more like this? Please leave a comment below. Like it, share it, subscribe to it. Hit that notification bell so you guys never miss a thing. And we'll see you next time. Peace.